So welcome back, and thank you again for tuning in. So first things first, the podcast, as you may have noticed, has changed its name to the Skateboarding History Podcast. As I am now branching out to more than just skate spots, the name switch seemed like a logical move. We would appreciate giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We are generating more listeners and only have a very minimal number of reviews, so we would be really appreciative if you could just take a few seconds to drop us a review on either of those platforms that you're streaming from today. Today, I am happy to announce that I have an interview with former SIMS Skateboarding Team member Marc Hollander. Now, Marc grew up in the Santa Barbara area of Mountain Drive and was at the forefront of skateboarding during the late 70s and early 80s. I've always been very interested in SIMS growing up. Their attitude and style has been really infectious. Getting my first glimpse of them in some of the early skateboarding magazines that I had as a kid. So today, Marc touches on the history of his skateboarding journey and his involvement with Tom Sims and the SIMS Skateboarding Team, sharing his perspective and stories of skateboarding during this monumental time in history. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it. Enjoy.
I came to Santa Barbara in '69, just happenstance. I was just a hippie kid that was born in San Francisco, moved to Sur, moved to New Mexico, moved back to Big Sur. My mom decides, oh, she's got a friend going to Santa Barbara, so she decides, well, let's just hop a ride and go down there. So we pulled out of Big Sur and we end up in Santa Barbara, and she meets this guy who's 1/3 owner in this property. And that property would have these parties because they were all a bunch of conga players. And we had a summer solstice party, which our house was known for the parties. And we would have parties that would start one day and end a couple days later. So summer solstice was our biggest party. We had three guys that bought the house for $27,000 in 1966.
Oh,
So, and it was an acre and a third, and it was a one giant adobe house and one little shack in the back. So come back up to 75 and Tom Sims shows up. I've never even seen skateboarding. He brings the first Skateboarder magazine with Greg Weaver on the cover, and it was right when urethane started. So he brings it to the house on the summer solstice party, and I'd never met him. I'd never seen skateboarding. And all of us little kids are just gathered around him going, oh, wow, look, oh, my, wow. The next weekend I went to the swap meet and bought a skateboard for $25.
But how old were you at that point?
I was, that would put me at 14.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I started late. All the Dogtown boys, they started, 8, 9 years old because they lived in this Southern California. Skateboards were everywhere. They were basically creating skateboards down there, and I'd never seen them. So I end up at the swap meet the next weekend and buy this 23-inch oak skateboard with Chicago wheels and Chicago trucks and loose balls. And that next weekend after getting that board, we go over to Westmont College because we lived on a road that was almost all dirt. I mean, it was potholes and bad asphalt. So it was not something, it was a private road,
Wow.
which was great because the cops couldn't come up to bust the parties because it was a private road. So unless they had a search warrant, they couldn't come up to come up and, try to take us down. So we lived right on the border of Westmont College. And we went over to Westmont College, me with my brand new skateboard, which was an old used skateboard. And my friends who had already gotten into it because they were Southern California, they were ahead of the game for me. They actually got me into it. I'd never even seen it. But I had a couple people, including Jeff Neely, who was one of my main friends who Tom Sims rented from. So we all end up over at Westmont College, and that was my first time, skating around in front of their basketball gymnasium. And, you know, once you get on that rolling board, you don't want to get off.
Do you still have your old skate deck,
Oh,
or
no.
no?
I wish I had my original quivers because,
Yeah.
God, I had such a quiver with Sims. I probably had 10 boards and freestyle board, a slalom board. We had a board that we would just use in the rain. We had them so that it was kind of a thrasher, but you'd take it out when it was raining. And also when we went to contests, we would take the board with us so we could go into the pool with water in it and play around in the pool with water in it with a skateboard. So it was like your thrasher rain board, right? Then 24-inch, 27-inch, 30-inch. When you got to the 30 inches, those are what we used for pools and banks and for pretty much parks, pools, banks. And then a 36, which you'd use for bigger stuff. And then the 44, which you'd use for the real big stuff. And then as well as I rode a Lonnie Toft 8-wheeler. So yeah, the quivers back then were pretty cool because you had all these different things that we did. Started out on sidewalks, and then we moved to hills, and then we started doing cones, and then we moved to banks, and then we started doing, the pools, and it was banks and ramps and pools, but originally it was all flat. We were kind of trying to emulate surfing, just like the Dogtown boys were doing. But we were a clan that was probably a little more surf oriented, and we were also we rode longboards because of the influence of Tom and his longboards. So being around him gave us that, like, oh, well, if you're going to go fast, you increase the wheelbase, and you can go a lot faster, which is also going to make it so that you are definitely more surfy because you're not doing the tight arcs, you're doing the more longboard, longer arcs. To go back to the beginning, but further back to the beginning, we started really just that first time at Westmont College. And then it's because we didn't have any good concrete where we were at. Next door to me, or over the canyon from me, was a guy's driveway he had made a really nice driveway, and he would let us skate there. So a bunch of us would meet there almost every evening and skate. And we'd set up like a high jump. I made a high jump that we could do because we got into high jumping because Sims was a world record holder in the high jump, and we got into that high jump and just skating around. The thing had this wonderful little place where you could drop in and do a little turn and do a slide back because it had like an entryway that went to this main platform. But Jamie Johnson would meet us over there, and he lived right below Tom Sims. And Jamie Johnson went on to work with Powell Skateboards and is still with Powell Skateboards, I think 40 years now.
Oh.
He runs the wood shop. And then Jeff Neely, who was the son of the person who was renting Tom and Chuck their place to live, he would meet us over there. My next door neighbor, Jimmy Lizelle, and maybe a few other little kids. And so we'd meet over there pretty much every evening. But the T-Bowl was the place that we really developed the longboard. Now, the T-Bowl wasn't originally a skate spot. It was a place where people would go swimming because it was holding water at that point. It was only when the pipes rusted through that allowed the water to drain out that it became that I think Andy Johnson, who was part of this matriarchal family from the Bohemian community there, his dad you had this place called the Castle, and they would have the parties of parties on Mountain Drive in that Bohemian section there between Mountain Drive and between Coyote Road and Cold Spring Road, which is the area just above Westmont College. So he would have all these parties. But anyway, Andy and the Hydes, they were the ones who actually discovered it and told Tom about it. And the Hydes were another part of the family that Bobby Hyde was the one who originally owned all the property in that Bohemian section and was selling off acres at like $500 an acre. So he came up there I guess it was in the 50s, and he bought this chunk of property and he started selling off these chunks. And the people that came and settled were all these Bohemian artists and potters and painters and musicians and so on. So a lot of different things came out of there. So anyway, the Johnsons and the Hydes were Bobby Hyde was the guy who originally bought all this property and sent it out. Well, he had some kids and then he had some grandkids. Those grandkids were some of the first skaters of the T-Bowl. A guy named Marcos Hyde and a guy named Rick Hyde were the two older brothers, and then Kike Hyde. That along with Andy Johnson went up there. And then Tom found out about it. And since Tom lived with the Neelys, who was another one of the older families, the Bohemian families there, since I was friends with Jeff Neely, then I found out about it. So the first time that we went up there, I went up there with my next door neighbor and Jeff Neely and myself, and we climbed under the fence, not at the gate where normally people would hop the gate and walk up the road before they did the whole security guard thing. So we'd climb under the fence quite west of there, and there was a trail, and we took the trail up there and walked up there, and I just about shit my pants. I'm like, oh my, because and this was the era of the 24-inch skateboard. I hadn't gotten on the longboard yet. So we went up there and we were just blown away at this place. Like, oh my God, it is, for us, it was like the Waimea of skateboarding.
Yeah.
And when people went up there with their 24-inch boards, they would wobble when they hit the bottom because of the speed that you were hitting. You were hitting at least 25 miles an hour by the time you hit the bottom. And between 25 and 30 or anything over 20, pretty much, if your trucks are too loose, you're going to wobble. And so a lot of people, they would just splat in the bottom. But if you got on a 36 or a 44, you could take that as fast as you wanted. And so you'd push along the top, like 3 or 4 pushes, and then just knife into it. When we'd go up there after it became known, you'd go up there and there would be 100 people.
Yeah, I've seen. It's just crowds just
all
watching.
The walls
that
are surrounding it. Yeah. People would be sitting up on the walls looking down.
Yeah.
And there would be a line of people from the bottom of the stairs. There used to be stairs that would lead up to the takeoff spot. And they'd all be, waiting, and you'd have people waiting on both sides of it. Like on one side, there was a corner where you could sit and drop in. On the other side, there was a place that people would wait to drop in. So not just the main place where you'd roll across and drop in. They'd be in like 2 other corners and one other spot. But you'd go up there and it was just like the full party scene. I mean, there'd be these people all the way around the entire thing, and they'll all be getting loaded and drinking beer and, just craziness. And we did have a couple of fires in the Montecito Hills that made it so that the pools became a thing. And right next door to my house was a pool that previous to the fire, they drained the pool, and we went and skated the pool with the cover over the top, and it was before we were that good or anything. But very interesting that first time that I skated what's known as the Char Bowl, and this ended up in one magazine advertisement for a company called Skate Pads, which was the first original skate pad.
Yeah, I think I've seen. I think you had that on your Facebook page, right? And you kind of you're on and then there's like a platform. You kind of go from the pool onto like a more of a vert.
The guy who did that thought, oh well, let's put an extension on it.
Yeah.
Like lame, but whatever. He wanted to put an extension on it. So
that's a lovely shot. That one. It's really good, really nice photo, and you got the people in the back. You can see the expressions on the people's face in the background who are kind of sitting up on the side of the pool.
Yeah, in the back is Doug DeMontmorency, who went on to get a model, and David Hyde, who was part of the Hyde clan from Mountain Drive, and my next door neighbor Jimmy, he's the redhead in the shot, and his sister, and then some other. But yeah, there was a bunch of people that came to watch. When pools came around, and pools and parks, pools first and then parks second. But the first parks that we had, they both had pools in them, and we had 2 parks in Santa Barbara that one was kind of so-so. It was called Golf and Fun, and if you look at, I'll send you my channel that has my all my videos on it. I've got a YouTube channel.
Yeah, definitely.
It's got a number of videos, music and skate. But anyway, Golf and Fun was so-so, but Sparks was off the charts as far as being, because Sparks had a number of different elements that it started with a moon bowl that was only about 4 feet deep and rounded tops. It was like the beginner bowl, and then it had a peanut, which was another 2 feet deeper than that, and then it had a reservoir, which was another 2 feet deeper than that, and then it had a half pipe, which was 13 feet with 3 feet of vertical, and then it had a keyhole bowl, which had about a foot of vertical and was about 9, and then it had a kidney bowl that was 11 with about 2 feet of vertical, and then it had this insane thing called the Pro Bowl, which was about 13 feet deep with 3 feet of vertical. And it was so hard to get out of it that sometimes people would drop into it and roll around, and then they couldn't get back out.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, the progression of skateboarding happened rather quickly, and especially once they started to do the bowl contests, that's when the vertical skateboarding really progressed. And the whole street skating, that was kind of, street skating happened, the typical modern street skating happened because insurance was lost and all the parks closed.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there was no place to skate, so the skaters just adapted. And the first, I don't know if you know that Steve Rocco skated for SIMS. And Rocco's first model, he started World Industries, was one of the first double-ended, double-kicked skateboards. It was a 24-inch freestyle board with kind of a square nose and a square tail, and it had the same amount of nose and tail. So that was kind of pioneered really with SIMS again, and then that eventually became what's the typical street skate, popsicle stick of today. But to go back again to the beginning, I started in 75, and about a year later, I'd started selling. I was an entrepreneur. I was selling all kinds of stuff door to door, and I'd fish and sell the fish, and I'd, whatever I could do to make money. Well, I found out that SIMS was making wheels, so I started selling his wheels to my friends. And he didn't have a skate shop. All he had was he'd get the wheels and the boards and whatever, and he'd sell them out of the back of his car. And he'd go to the swap meet and sell them at the swap meet. This is before he built the skate shop.
Yeah.
So about a year after meeting him, I was selling his wheels, and then I started riding for him. And when I started riding for him, that's when I started to progress a lot because I was getting free equipment. But also around that same time, he decided to open a skate shop. Well, I had moved from the Mountain Drive area where I grew up and the private road down to Milpas and Anapamu, which was three blocks over from the high school that I was going to, or junior high that I went through was 3 blocks further away. So I'm 6 blocks from high school, or 3 blocks from high school, 6 blocks from junior high, and 2.5 blocks where Tom decided to open his skate shop. Now, he got all of us grommets, and all of us, I call us skate rats. Some people don't like the name skate rat, but we were skate rats. He got all of us to come help him like sand the place, get it all ready, because he built it pretty nice. It had a nice curved desk, and it had a glass underneath that showed the stuff, and and he was getting his stuff built in Los Angeles and having it shipped up there, and then he was selling it out of that skate shop, which was right next to an ice cream store, which was the place that all the high schoolers would hang out from Santa Barbara High School. So he had the ultimate little spot to push it to the kids, right? Well, that spot ended up growing as the team grew and as everything grew into, he had 3 warehouses. And then across the street from that skate shop, he had the office and a shipping department. So it grew into his little skateboard empire there. So, after SIMS built that shop, I ended up working for him first as doing skateboard assembly and warehouse work, and then finally as a shipping clerk. So I'm skating for him and I'm working for him. So a lot of the original skateboards that came out of that shop, I put together, and all the ski boards I assembled.
Okay.
The history of the SIMS skateboard team is first, it's Tom all by himself,
Yeah.
riding his converted water skis, like the early Del Mar contest where the Z Boys showed up. He's on a water ski, and he's doing lots of foot over foot walking and spinners and just kind of being all mellow and cool. And when he moved up to Santa Barbara, he ended up tuning in with these guys in Ventura that included Richie Vanderwick,
Okay.
Stevie Monahan, John Drury. At that point, he got Edie Robertson on his team, and I think he had a couple of girls. So there was a team of maybe five or six, 7 people total, and that was the original team. So the first, I don't know if you've ever seen his first ad that he had. It had the old Sims logo on it and so on. So that group of people were on the first Sims team.
Okay.
And then the second group of people were some of those people that were still from the original Ventura team, as well as the Santa Barbara group that he had pulled in, which included Scott Hansen, Doug DeMontmorency, David Hyde, myself, Gary Russell. A lot of these people were in some of those early advertisements. And so we had that. At the same time, he started to develop an amateur team.
Okay.
So that included quite a group from Southern California. And I don't know if you've heard of a guy named Scott Hostert. Hostert was on his team, and his dad was helping to sort of be a team guy that was running the amateur team in the LA area.
Okay.
And at that same time, then he started branching out, and he'd get people from San Diego. We had some people from San Diego that were on the team, and we started to get some people from Florida. And, so these people were all
So it's quite
over the place.
wide net, yeah.
So there was a lot of people in that.
Yeah.
So, it started again back in Ventura. Then it moved to Santa Barbara. And while it was in Santa Barbara, it branched out everywhere. And then the final part of it, while Sims was still running it, was he started to go head hunting, and he pulled in Orton, and he pulled in, Inouye was already with us, but he never got a model. Orton ended up with a model.
Yeah.
Andrecht ended up with a model. Greg Ayers ended up with a model. Brad Bowman, Bert Lamar, they were both from the Valley. Before the Bones Brigade came out, Sims was probably the de facto team that everybody looked up to. Red, white, and blue, and everybody. There was a lot of varying different types of skaters that rode for Tom. I mean, it's barely known that people like Stacy Peralta even rode some Sim stuff for a short time, and Jim Muir rode some Sim stuff, and Jay Adams was on our team for like a month. And he was someone that originally he kind of grabbed people that he knew that were skaters and surfers that he thought had potential, and then once he got established, he was kind of a headhunter. He'd go after the guy that was the hot guy, and he'd steal him away. That's where he got. That's why he went after Jay, and that's why Andrecht wasn't really that well known, but he went after Andrecht, and he got him in, and then Greg Ayers and George Orton and Brad Bowman and Bert Lamar, and the only person that was local that ended up with a model was Doug DeMontmorency, who was another neighbor of Tom's.
What were the dynamics back then? Because I mean, it must have been a pretty proud moment to kind of, ride for the team. You get the gear, you've got your jersey, you've got all that sort of thing. Was there a lot of competitiveness between people in the team, or between? Or you guys kind of just, I suppose that was what was sparking your progression. You wanted to do tricks better than the guy standing next to you. So I can imagine it must have been a pretty competitive environment.
It was, and there was also the photo incentives. If you got photos in the magazines, you got paid for it. Unfortunately, it didn't matter whether, unless you got a cover, which was what was the epitome. It didn't matter where it was. Like I got 2 back covers with quarter-page ads, and I got $25. $25 to be on the back cover of a magazine.
Yeah.
For somebody's product, which was like, wow. These days you'd be like, what? You were on the cover of an international magazine and you got $25? Wow,
Yeah.
that buys like a cup. That's what, 4 cups of coffee?
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
But if you got on the cover, you get $500.
yeah.
And if you got a full page picture, you got $100. And if
Yeah.
half page was $50. So my best placing was a second place at the Endless Wave Pro. And the funky thing about the Endless Wave Pro is up to that time, $500 was the most that you could win for a competition. The Endless Wave Pro came, it was $2,500 for first place. But for second place, it was $500. So I got second. I really wish I could have. I mean, the main reason I didn't get first was the guy who got first was somebody who basically lived at Oxnard Skate Park.
Okay.
His name was Jack Waterman. He was a machine. He was like one of the first people that just was really so strong, and just he didn't fall. And
Yeah.
I didn't fall. I wasn't that strong with my maneuvers, but I was stylish, and I ended up getting through.
And between the different like skate teams, I mean, obviously you said it was competitive between other members of indirectly within the SIMS team, but was there also a element of rivalry between the other skate teams as well?
There was always the created rivalry between Los Angeles and San Diego, but we were SIMS was kind of fringy because, we were kind of corporate, but we weren't, and
Yeah.
we weren't LA and we weren't San Diego. So that early period, I think there was a lot more of that rivalry. But when it came down to it, like I started skating with a lot of the Dogtown boys at Oxnard's Endless Wave, because Mira would come up and Shogo would come up and Jay
Okay.
would come up and other guys would come up, and we're all part of the same clan. And it wasn't like we were so much different, like the Logans versus the Dogtown boys. They were 2 totally different types of styles, the Logans and that whole thing. I mean, when the Del Mar contest happened, and you can see this in the movies and the documentary, there was the people that were like, oh, this is how skateboarding is. And we're going to do 360s, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do handstands. And when they saw that the people were into, they were more into the people that had this radical, tear it up, shred kind of mentality.
Sort of gritty type of style. Yeah.
Yeah. It was more based off of surfing than it was off of, gymnastics or off of skiing or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
These different cliques. So I think that was more of a clique. The people that were the surf skaters versus the people that were these traditionalists that thought this is the way skateboarding should be. And you can see that in the doc where, Ty Page is like, what the hell? They're just, they were turning their nose more up at us and we were turning our noses up at them. But when it came down to it, we're all part of the same thing. It's like a kid who rolls down the sidewalk's a skateboarder, and a kid who hits the mega ramp and does, 720, 12 feet out is a skateboarder. And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't matter what you do. As long as it puts a smile on your face, you're like,
exactly.
All right, double shakas. SIMS had bought a blue van, and I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the blue van with Stevie Monahan jumping
Mm,
off of it. Well,
yeah.
that blue van was the Sims team van. He had the whole inside of it was super padded with shag carpeting. I mean, it was a real shagging van, if you know
Yeah,
what I mean.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And Craig would drive it around. Originally, Sims drove it around, and he would drive us down to parks and do photo sessions. And all of us would be just in the back of the van. This was before the seatbelt laws,
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
could you'd just be laid out in the van. And then it became Craig driving us around and going to these competitions. And I did the third Hester, the fourth Hester, and then there was one in Oasis, which was kind of like a Hester, and then there was the one we did one in Newark, California. We did one in the next one was the Big O, and then there was the one in Oasis, and then there was one in the Oxnard Pro. So at least four of those big competitions where we'd go in the team van, all of us packed up, go to a hotel. And the hotel, I'm sure you've heard the stories of the hotels, how the hotels, all these skaters on one floor in a hotel, and it would just be
Mayhem.
pandemonium. I mean, the the rooms would be like full of people partying, and then
Yeah.
there would be the hallway would just get wrecked because there would be like water balloon fights and all this and that, and there's illicit sex and drugs and rock and roll going
It's
on, and
a different
people going
different time, yeah.
crazy. And the last one I went to, which was the Del Mar Pro-Am, which was I guess 1980,
Yeah.
79 or 80. That's when Jay was with us. And we go to Denny's, and of course Jay had to start a food fight at Denny's. So it went from everybody just sitting around eating to suddenly
It just
getting thrown out of
escalates.
Denny's.
Uh,
And ditto when we got back to the hotel turned into pandemonium. But one
but
funny story down there was, as a surfer kid and a hippie kid, I didn't really wear underwear much. And the shorts, if you remember back then, they weren't very long.
no, they were very, very short and yeah, easy to get a
So we're
slip.
sitting there in the van, and a bunch of people are all, it's like a big thing in the parking lot at the Del Mar contest. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard of the guy named Bongo, who used to hang
Uh,
out with the Z Boys and the Dogtown crew. And
okay.
he was there, and we were all sitting around. I don't know if we were getting stoned or what the hell we were doing. We were all sitting around out in the parking lot, and a number of Sims team people, and as well as other people. And these groupie girls walk up, and they're just kind of like just chatting it up with all the other skaters that are there. And they kept looking at me and giggling and looking at me and giggling. I'm like, what's going on here? I don't know what's going on. And they leave, and then Bongo looks down, and my short shorts were
Slip. Yeah.
my stuff was hanging out.
Oh god. Did you start
So the
wearing
girls were
underwear? Did you
like
start
looking at
wearing
me.
underwear after that? Huh? If anything is going to inspire to wear underwear after that, it's that story.
It was, and I should have known, because I went to this contest in Aptos, which was this back in the 77 or something, and
Mm.
I kind of got busted at that contest too for the shorts and not having everything gathered up correctly
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that sooner or later there will be the definitive Sims documentary. Pure Juice, the story of Sims skateboards, and is the way I coined it.
So when did Sims completely kind of just dismantle? So you said that by the 80s you were pretty well finished, or the 80 you were done.
So eventually what happened was he sold the right. He was so involved with the snowboarding that he sold the rights to the person who owned, I think it was the person who owned Veriflex. And that's when, the later part where Christian got a model, and he started to pull in these other people. But then at that point, he was no longer doing anything.
No. Okay.
He was just focusing on the snowboards. But I was done 80, 81.
80.
So
And
after that period, that's when he sort of got into the snowboards, and Chuck was developing his snowboards at the same time. So
mm,
I went from Sims to Barfoot, and I kicked myself for doing it, because if I would have, I knew George from the beginning, and Stacy was one of my heroes. I really should have just tried to put my foot in the door, because I could have
mm,
kept the my career alive, and ended up with them, because some of the people that ended up on them, they actually started on Sims, like
okay.
Jay Smith. Jay Smith was a Sims writer before he was a PAL writer. The Sims team was quite a group of guys that just, it was great to be part of that.
Do you still do you still have contact? I mean, some of these people, have you kept in contact with most of your life, or since then, or is it sort of
Well, the people that I was local with,
yeah?
Scott Hansen, Doug DeMontmorency, David Hyde,
Mm,
those were like, three of my skate brothers from Santa Barbara.
okay, yeah,
So I still talk to Doug regularly. He moved to France.
okay,
He was in France for a number of years, then Spain. I think he's living in Portugal now. David Hyde, he moved to Oregon. He got involved with the Hood Meadows area up there. He works and works up there. So I'm still in contact with him. Thanks to Facebook, ended up being in contact with others, like contact with David Andrecht, George Orton, Brad Bowman, Lonnie Toft, Gordy Linneman, who also rode for Sims. They were part of the Pepsi team. Him and Lonnie were good friends. So a lot of people, thanks to social media, I was
yeah,
able to
exactly.
reconnect with, and we talk every once in a while
Mm, mm,
and catch up. A lot of people, they keep fragmenting and going other places, and
yeah.
then they come back, but
Mm.
that's a way to keep in touch with people.
And you, I mean, because so I didn't realize, I was looking you up and I saw, so within the 90s, it just sort of how your skate, I guess, career sort of moved on from when you left Sims. I saw that you're on Thrasher was it May of 1990?
Yeah, it was taken a
Yeah.
couple of years earlier. Yeah, so I stuck with Barfoot, riding Barfoot skateboards, and then also got sponsored by PAL. So
Okay.
PAL was giving me skateboards for a number of years, and
Yep.
still, if I need something, I talk to the guys there, because so many of the Santa Barbara skaters ended up working for PAL.
Okay. All right.
And I've known George again going back to '78, when we did Sims was, before George had a team. Sims was the team that did his testing. So I tested the original Bones wheels,
Okay.
and we did tests on all of the original Quicksilver stuff. Um, yeah, I rode Bones before they were Bones.
But how often are you skating these days?
Right now I had knee surgery
Okay. Yep.
like 3 years ago. I'm not doing the airs and stuff. I take it back to the roots. Like, I like
Yeah.
to surf while I skate, so I'm
Yeah.
still going to surf while I skate. And I'm stoked that people like Cab and Hawk can still stay at that level, where they're
Mm,
still able to throw down a 540 and stuff. But
yeah. It's amazing.
my real heyday for that was probably the '90s to 2004 or something, and then I started to slow down. And body's getting old. I've got a back injury, and I've got
Yeah.
a knee injury, and
Now you've
it's
always got to have these interests and these hobbies that kind of get you out of your head and get you can kind of focus on something else. And that's why, like, can see with talking to you, you still got such the hype for your love of skateboarding and talking about the history and things. It's just it's nice to see. I think it's you never
yeah. I
that
don't think
you
I'll ever
never
lose my stoke.
and that you shouldn't. I think it's often people who have been skateboarding for a long time. It's they got this spark in their eye when they talk about it. And I don't think you never lose that. But no, it's great just to hear you and just for this sit down with you and talk. I think as you said, like time flies, and it's so important to capture these stories.
I'll check out some more of your podcasts and shoot you over a link, and
definitely
keep in touch email wise.
Definitely. Perfect. All right.
All right, Tim.
Cheers. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye. Bye.
Double shock us,
Bye.
brother.